It is about the fourth straight day of it being 100 degrees here in Denver, Colorado. And after living in Denver for a while and experiencing the dry heat that we have here, but growing up on the East Coast and competing in New England and also down in the Washington, D.C. area for such a long time, I wanted to film a video about how to train effectively in the heat, because it is one of those factors that will limit your performance. And there's no way around that. It's sort of like altitude in that way. There is no getting around the fact that summer heat and humidity, just like altitude, is going to reduce your ability to run hard, to run fast. But there are still some ways that we can mitigate the heat, that we can still train effectively and accomplish a lot of the goals that we still want to accomplish when we're training. So I first want to talk about some ways to mitigate the heat and then some big picture ideas to help you think about better summer training. And let's first talk about how to make it a little bit more bearable. Because I know right now I'm hanging out in the shade. It's really hot here. I'm about 3 miles into my run and I stopped to film this video, so I'm just pouring sweat everywhere. But I find that one of the most effective ways to get around summer heat is to run as early in the morning as you can. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, the temperature is going to be at its lowest of the day. And number two, the sun isn't going to be so strong. And that's really important here in Denver, or if you're up at altitude, because there's just less air to filter out all those UV rays. So your sun exposure is a lot higher. Now, if you live somewhere where it's really humid, like Washington, D.C., or where I grew up in Massachusetts, it's going to be more humid in the morning than it will be in the afternoon or in the evening. Now, nevertheless, I still think the morning is a better time to run. I'd rather deal with lower temperatures, weaker sun, and higher humidity. It's a trade-off, but I think it's a worthy trade-off. Now, of course, you want to start your run hydrated. If you're running first thing in the morning, make sure that you're not drinking 4 beers the night before and waking up dehydrated in the morning. Let's start the run dehydrated. And if you're running more than maybe about an hour, 45 to 60 minutes, depending on your sweat rate, then you probably want to take in some fluids while you're out there running. And I'm very fortunate to be able to run in these beautiful Denver parks here, and there's a lot of water fountains. And what I love about water fountains is not so much the ability for me to drink water while I'm out there running, but the ability to splash a bunch of water on my head. And when I used to have hair, that made a bigger difference, because it kept my head a lot cooler and a lot wetter for longer. But here in Denver, where it's very dry, that evaporates very, very quickly, and it really helps you cool down. Now, one of the reasons why humans are so good at running in the heat is because of our sweat system. We sweat a lot, that sweat evaporates off our body, and that evaporation cools us down. But if you live somewhere where it's very, very humid, then you are just not really going to be evaporating as much fluid off your body. And so dousing yourself with cooler water is one way to reduce your temperature and make that run a little bit more bearable. I also really like to wear lighter colors that aren't going to absorb as much heat from the sun. I'm kind of violating that rule today, but man, this shirt is just so comfortable from Lululemon. And if you can, try to run off the road. Get off the sidewalk, get off the road, because asphalt can really absorb a lot of heat and then radiate it back up. And you're gonna just feel a lot hotter if you're out there running on the road. So try to find some green space like this. It's not gonna absorb the heat. You're probably gonna be able to find a lot more shade, and that's gonna make that run a little bit more manageable for you when those summer temperatures get really high. Probably one of the most important things to remember when you're running in hot conditions is to not overly focus too much on pace. Now, running is a pace sport. It's kind of what we're hardwired to think about all the time. But in the summer, it's very difficult to hit the same paces that you would normally do in better weather conditions. Because after all, remember, it's just like altitude. You're not gonna run as fast as you would at sea level here in Denver, especially if you go up into the mountains. And just like that, you're not gonna be able to run as fast in really warm, humid conditions. So instead of relying on pace, we've really got to think a lot more about effort. Let's run based on our perceived effort or on a rating of perceived exertion. And that's probably going to mean that your actual pace is a little bit slower, or maybe even substantially slower, whether that's your easy pace or whether that's any workout pace that you're doing, whether you're out on the track, trail, road, wherever you're doing a workout, it's just probably going to be slower. But we have to be kind to ourselves in the summer. We have to recognize that heat and humidity are serious performance limiters. And because of that, let's focus more on effort. Let's not hold ourselves to what we can do in ideal conditions, because it's certainly not ideal for training right now. Lastly, it's always beneficial to structure your training around the weather considerations. It wouldn't be very smart of you to plan your goal peak marathon or 5K or whatever race it was in the middle of July. You're probably not going to be able to run very fast. So the summer is actually a really great time for base training. You can do more aerobic workouts. You can focus more on running volume and just not focus so much on the pace. And I think that's much more productive, and it's going to set you up for a much better fall if you're not being overly critical on yourself because you simply can't run as fast. Now, that's actually an interesting point, because good summer training leads to good fall racing. And that's because when you do train in the heat, your body becomes a lot more efficient. And it doesn't actually take very much. Just a couple weeks of heat training is going to leave you feeling more efficient. Your sweat is going to be optimized for the heat. You're going to start sweating sooner to cool you down sooner. There's a lot of really interesting adaptations that the body goes through when you train in these hot conditions. So if you are wondering if you should just take the summer off and abandon your running for a couple months and start up again in the fall, stick with it. Be consistent, because all those adaptations that happen in the summer, as soon as it starts to be September, October, and November, and those temperatures fall, you are going to feel so much better. You are going to be used to running in the sauna or the steam room, wherever you live, and as soon as those temperatures fall, you are going to be capable of a lot faster racing. So take advantage of those adaptations, train well in the summer so that you can race well in the fall.